Before this moment, the heart did not arrive here by accident. This is not just another video. This is not just another reminder. If life has been pressing in on the chest lately, if the nights have been heavier than the days, if there is a quiet question inside that no one else hears, then this moment was not random. There is a reason this message found its way into these hands, into these eyes, into this exact moment of the day. Not because everything is falling apart, but because something inside is being prepared to rise. Most people scroll past pain. Most people look for comfort, not truth. But the heart that stays is the heart that is ready to understand why certain doors closed without explanation, ready to understand why some people disappeared without goodbye, ready to understand why the path became harder right when it was supposed to become easier. This is not about being punished. This is about being shaped, because there is a kind of guidance that only appears when everything familiar begins to fade. There is a kind of strength that only grows when the heart realizes it cannot carry life by itself anymore. So before going any further, let the world pause for a moment. Not to listen with the ears, but to listen with what has been quietly hurting. Because what comes next is not meant for everyone. It is meant for the one who feels like life has been asking more than they know how to give. And if that feels personal, it is because it is. Stay, not for answers, but for understanding. This pain was personally written for your guidance. There is a kind of pain that feels different from ordinary sadness. It does not just touch the surface of life, it reaches deep into the heart. It makes a person stop in the middle of their routine and ask quiet questions that were never asked before. Questions about purpose, about direction, about why certain things had to happen this way and not another way. This kind of pain does not arrive loudly. It often comes in silence, in moments when the world keeps moving but the heart feels like it has been asked to stand still. Many people think that suffering is random, that it comes without meaning, like a storm that appears without warning. But when someone begins to reflect deeply, they start to notice something else. The moments of greatest discomfort often appear at turning points in life, when a person is about to grow, when a person is about to change, when a person is being gently or sometimes firmly redirected away from a path that would not have led them closer to who they were meant to become. Pain has a way of slowing life down. It takes away the rush. It removes the distractions. It makes the heart sit with itself in a way that comfort never does. In ease, people move forward without looking inward. In difficulty, the heart naturally turns inside and upward. It begins to search for meaning beyond what the eyes can see. This is often where guidance begins to form, not as a sudden answer, but as a quiet awareness that something deeper is happening beneath the surface of the moment. There are times when a person loses something they thought they needed, a relationship that felt like safety, a plan that felt like certainty, a role that felt like identity. When these things fall away, the first feeling is often confusion. The second is emptiness. The heart feels exposed, like a structure that lost its walls. But in that exposure, something important is revealed. The heart begins to see what it was truly leaning on. It begins to recognize how much weight it had placed on things that were never meant to carry the soul. This is where guidance quietly enters, not as a voice that speaks in words, but as a shift that happens within. The person starts to understand that what was taken away may not have been a punishment, but a release from something that was shaping them in a smaller, narrower way than what they were capable of becoming. The pain becomes a sign that the heart is being asked to grow beyond its old limits. There is also a softness that pain brings. It opens spaces inside that were once closed. A person who has struggled often becomes more aware of others who are struggling. They listen differently. They speak more carefully. They notice what they once overlooked. This change does not happen through advice or reminders. It happens through experience, through walking a path that teaches the heart what words never could. Sometimes guidance comes in the form of patience, the kind that is not chosen but learned. When a door stays closed longer than expected, when an answer takes more time than hoped, when progress feels slow and uncertain, In these moments, the heart is trained to wait without losing trust, to continue moving forward without clear signs, to hold on to hope even when the future is not visible. This kind of patience changes how a person sees the world. They stop measuring life only by what they gain. They start noticing who they are becoming along the way. The focus slowly shifts from outcomes to character, from achievements to awareness, from control to trust. There is also a lesson in humility that pain teaches gently but firmly. It reminds a person of their limits, of how little they truly control, of how fragile plans can be. This humility does not make someone weak. It makes them grounded. It helps them understand that strength does not always come from standing tall, but sometimes from bowing inwardly and accepting that not everything is in their hands. In this space of acceptance, a deeper connection often forms, a connection that is not based on asking only when something is needed, but on remembering even when things are quiet. The heart begins to turn toward prayer, not just as a request, but as a place of rest. A place where the noise of the world softens and the weight of carrying everything alone is finally set down. Over time, many people look back at their hardest moments and realize something that was impossible to see while they were inside them. They realize that those moments changed the direction of their life. They led them to new understanding, new priorities, new relationships, or even a new version of themselves that feels more honest and more aligned with what truly matters. This does not mean the pain was easy. It does not mean the tears were unnecessary. It means that within the difficulty, there was also a quiet shaping taking place. Like a sculptor working slowly, removing pieces that do not belong, revealing a form that was always there but hidden beneath the surface. Guidance often does not arrive as a clear sign pointing left or right. It arrives as a change in the heart's desires. What once felt important begins to feel lighter. What once felt distant begins to feel meaningful. The person finds themselves drawn to things that bring peace rather than just excitement, depth rather than noise, stillness rather than constant motion. This is one of the most subtle ways a life is redirected, not by forcing new paths to appear, but by gently changing what the heart reaches for. The pain becomes part of that process. It loosens the grip on what no longer fits and makes room for what will. In the quiet moments, when the world feels far away and the heart feels exposed, there is often a realization that begins to form, a realization that this experience is not happening to break, but to build. Not to push away, but to draw closer. Not to end something, but to begin something that cannot yet be fully seen. And in that realization, a different kind of strength is born. A strength that does not depend on circumstances being perfect. A peace that does not disappear when things go wrong. A trust that grows not because everything makes sense, but because the heart has learned that it does not need to understand everything to keep moving forward. This is how pain becomes guidance, not through sudden clarity, but through slow transformation, not through answers that arrive all at once, but through a journey that changes the one who is walking it. And slowly, almost without noticing, the person begins to carry their life differently, with less fear of loss, with more awareness of what truly lasts, with a heart that has been shaped, softened and strengthened by a path that once felt unbearable but now feels meaningful. What was taken from you was standing in the way of your light. There is a special kind of pain that comes when something is removed from life without warning. It can be a person who once felt like home, a plan that once felt like the future, a situation that once felt stable and safe. When it disappears, the heart does not just feel empty, it feels confused. It begins to ask why something that felt so important had to be taken away. At first, the mind often tells a harsh story. It says this is failure. It says this is rejection. It says this is proof that something went wrong. The heart listens to these thoughts and begins to carry a quiet shame, as if losing something means losing worth. But there is another way to look at what was removed. Sometimes what leaves is not being taken from the heart. Sometimes it is being lifted off the heart. Not everything that feels good is meant to stay. Not everything that feels comfortable is meant to remain. Some things enter life to teach a lesson, not to become a permanent part of the journey. When something is taken away, it often creates space. Space can feel uncomfortable at first. It can feel like a hollow place where something used to be, but space also allows light to enter. It allows air to move. It allows the heart to breathe in ways it could not before. Many people only realize this later when they look back and see who they were becoming in the presence of what was removed. They notice how their thoughts were shrinking, how their energy was draining, how their peace was slowly fading. They see that what they held onto was shaping them in a smaller, heavier way than they were meant to carry. The removal becomes a form of protection. Not protection from pain, but protection from becoming someone the heart would one day no longer recognize. There are moments in life when the heart becomes attached to something that feels like identity, a role, a relationship, a certain version of the future. When that thing disappears, it feels like the self disappears with it. The person does not just grieve what they lost, they grieve who they thought they were going to be. This kind of grief is deep. It sits quietly. It follows through daily routines. It shows up in small moments of silence when the mind drifts back to what once was. But even in this grief, something gentle is happening. The heart is being separated from an identity that was too narrow to hold its full potential. It is being invited to discover a wider version of itself. A version that is not defined by one person, one place, or one outcome. What was taken away may have been limiting the light that was meant to grow inside. Light in this sense does not mean happiness alone. It means clarity. It means purpose. It means a sense of inner strength that does not rely on external things to stay steady. Sometimes something has to leave for this light to be noticed. As long as the heart is focused on what is in front of it, it may not see what is forming within. The removal creates a moment of stillness. In that stillness, the heart begins to hear itself. It begins to notice what it truly needs, not just what it became used to having. There is also a lesson in trust that grows during these moments. Trust that what left did not do so without meaning. Trust that the story is not finished, even if the current chapter feels incomplete. This trust is not loud. It does not erase sadness. It does not rush healing. It sits quietly beneath the pain, like a steady ground that holds the heart even when everything else feels uncertain. Many people discover over time that what was removed was slowly pulling them away from their deeper values. It may have been creating dependence where there was meant to be independence, distraction where there was meant to be focus, noise where there was meant to be peace. When it leaves, the heart feels the absence, but it also feels a strange kind of freedom. A freedom that does not always feel joyful at first, but feels lighter. This lighter feeling is often the first sign of the heart beginning to realign, beginning to move back toward what gives life meaning beyond immediate comfort. There is also a quiet strength that develops when someone learns to stand without what they once leaned on. They begin to see that they can still move forward, they can still breathe, they can still hope. This realization changes how they face future challenges. They no longer see loss as the end of the road. They see it as a bend in the path. Over time, the heart becomes less afraid of what might be taken away because it has learned that it can survive and even grow after loss. It learns that its true foundation is not built on things that can disappear, but on something deeper and steadier. The idea of light becomes clearer here. Light is the part of the self that continues to exist even when circumstances change. It is the part that remains when titles fall away, when people move on, when plans shift. What was taken may have been casting a shadow over that light without being noticed. When the shadow is gone, the light feels exposed, vulnerable, but it also feels real, honest, alive. There are moments later in life when a person finds themselves standing in a place they could not have reached if what was taken had remained. A new understanding, a new direction, a new sense of purpose. And they realize that the loss was not a dead end, but a redirection. This realization does not always come quickly. Sometimes it takes years, sometimes it takes another chapter of life to open before the meaning of the previous one becomes clear. But when it does, the heart softens toward the past. The anger fades, the questions grow quieter, the story begins to feel more complete. The pain that once felt like being pushed away begins to feel like being guided forward. What was taken from you may have been standing in the way of your light, not because it was bad, but because it was no longer meant to stay. Some things belong to a certain season of life. When the season changes, they cannot come with you. Holding on to them would mean staying behind. And so they leave. Not to punish, not to break, but to make room. Room for growth, room for depth, room for a version of the heart that has not yet been fully revealed. When everything falls away, Allah becomes your only support. There comes a moment in life when the familiar structures that once held everything steady begin to loosen. The routines that brought comfort no longer feel secure. The people who once seemed close feel distant. The plans that once felt solid begin to blur at the edges. In this moment, the heart often feels as if it is standing in an open space with nothing to lean on. This is one of the most unsettling experiences a person can face because it touches a deep human fear of being alone and unprotected. At first, the mind tries to rebuild what has fallen away. It searches for new supports to replace the old ones, new distractions, new attachments, new ways to feel stable again. But there is a kind of emptiness that cannot be filled by simply adding something else in its place. This emptiness is different. It feels intentional, as if life itself has created a pause that cannot be rushed past. In this pause, something important begins to happen. The heart becomes aware of how much it depended on what is now gone. How much peace was placed in people, situations, or expectations that were never meant to be permanent. This awareness can feel uncomfortable, even painful, because it reveals a vulnerability that was hidden during times of ease. But within this vulnerability, there is also a quiet invitation, an invitation to place the heart's weight somewhere deeper, somewhere steadier than anything in the world. When everything external begins to fall away, the internal world becomes louder. Thoughts, fears, hopes, and questions rise to the surface. The heart is no longer distracted by constant motion. It has space to feel what it truly feels. This is not always a gentle experience. Sometimes it brings forward emotions that were buried under busyness and noise. Yet this exposure is part of the process. The heart cannot be strengthened without first being seen clearly. In these moments, reliance begins to change form. Instead of leaning outward, the heart begins to lean inward and upward. There is a shift from expecting stability from the world to seeking it in something beyond the world. This shift does not always come as a dramatic realization. Often it comes quietly, in small habits that begin to form. A moment of reflection in the middle of the day, a pause before reacting, a sense of turning inward during moments of uncertainty. Over time, these small moments begin to connect. They form a pattern of reliance that feels different from before, less hurried, less desperate, more steady. This kind of reliance is not built on the promise that life will become easy. It is built on the understanding that even when life becomes difficult, there is a support that does not change, a presence that remains even when circumstances do not. The heart begins to recognize that what it truly needs is not constant success, constant approval, or constant comfort. What it needs is a sense of being held even in moments of weakness, a sense of being seen even when no one else understands what is being carried. This recognition brings a new kind of peace, not the peace of having everything in order, but the peace of knowing that even when things fall apart, the heart is not abandoned. There is also a transformation that happens in how a person views strength. Before, strength may have been associated with control, with having answers, with being able to manage every situation. But when everything falls away, control becomes limited, answers become scarce, the ability to manage feels smaller. In this space, strength is redefined. It becomes the ability to remain steady without clarity, to continue moving forward without a clear map, to hold on to trust even when there is no visible sign of what comes next. This is a quieter strength. But it is deeper. It does not rely on circumstances. It relies on connection. As this connection grows, the heart often becomes less fearful of loss. It learns through experience that losing something does not mean losing everything, that there is a foundation beneath the changing surface of life. This does not make loss painless. It does not make separation easy, but it changes how the pain is carried. Instead of being something that crushes, it becomes something that is held. There is also a humility that grows in this process, a recognition of how small human control truly is, of how much of life unfolds beyond planning and prediction. This humility can be freeing. It lifts the heavy responsibility of trying to hold everything together. When the heart stops trying to carry the entire weight of life, it finds space to breathe. It finds room to rest in the understanding that not everything depends on its effort. This rest does not lead to passivity. It leads to a different kind of action. Actions that come from trust rather than fear, from intention rather than desperation. In relationships, this can look like loving without clinging, caring without controlling, being present without needing to secure every outcome. The heart learns to give and receive with more openness because it is no longer trying to use others as its only source of stability. In personal goals, this can look like striving without losing peace, working without tying self-worth to results, moving forward without believing that every success or failure defines the entire story. All of this grows from the same root, a reliance that is not shaken when the world shifts. There are moments later in life when a person looks back at the time when everything seemed to fall apart and sees it differently. They realize that this was not the moment when life lost its support. It was the moment when life revealed a deeper one. They see how the loss of certain things led to a gain in clarity, how the absence of certain people led to a stronger sense of self, how the collapse of certain plans led to paths they would never have chosen but are grateful to walk. This reflection does not erase the memory of pain, but it wraps it in understanding. The heart begins to carry its story with a sense of meaning rather than only memory. It recognizes that what once felt like being left alone was actually an invitation to discover a presence that had always been there but was overlooked during times of comfort. And in this discovery, there is a quiet confidence that grows. A confidence that does not come from knowing what will happen next, but from knowing that whatever happens, the heart is not without support. This confidence changes how the future is faced. It brings a calm that does not depend on certainty, a steadiness that does not depend on things staying the same. In this way, when everything falls away, something greater is revealed. Not a guarantee of ease, but a foundation of trust. Not a promise of a smooth path, but a sense of being guided even when the path is unclear. Your heart is being rebuilt, not just your life. There is a moment in every long hardship when a person begins to notice something subtle. The situation on the outside may still look the same. The problem may not be solved yet. The door may still be closed. The waiting may still feel heavy, but on the inside, something has started to shift. The thoughts are not as sharp as they once were. The reactions are not as quick. The heart pauses more often before responding. This is often the first quiet sign that the real work of the trial is not happening around the person, but within them. Many people enter difficult seasons focused only on changing their circumstances. They want the pain to stop. They want the situation to improve. They want life to return to how it was before. This desire is natural. But sometimes the deeper purpose of the moment is not to restore what was, but to reshape who is. The heart, like any living thing, can grow in directions that are not always healthy. It can become hard without noticing. It can become impatient without realizing it. It can become dependent on things that were never meant to be its foundation. Comfort often hides these changes. Success can cover them. Routine can make them invisible. Difficulty brings them into the light. When life becomes heavy, the heart is forced to slow down. In that slowing, it begins to see itself more clearly. It notices where it holds anger, where it carries fear, where it clings too tightly, where it expects too much from what is temporary. This awareness is not meant to cause guilt. It is meant to create space for rebuilding. Rebuilding is not a loud process. It does not come with announcements or visible signs. It happens in small, almost unnoticeable ways. A moment where the heart chooses patience instead of reaction. A moment where the mind chooses understanding instead of judgment. A moment where the soul chooses trust instead of control. These moments do not feel powerful when they happen. They often feel quiet and ordinary, but over time, they begin to form a new inner structure. A structure that is steadier, softer, and stronger at the same time. There is also a kind of healing that takes place during this rebuilding. Old disappointments that were never fully processed begin to surface. Old expectations that were never questioned begin to loosen. Old fears that once guided decisions begin to lose their hold. This can feel uncomfortable because it means facing parts of the self that were easier to ignore when life was busy and full. But in facing them, the heart becomes more honest, more whole. A rebuilt heart does not mean a perfect heart. It means a heart that is aware of its own limits. A heart that understands that it will sometimes feel weak, and that this weakness is not a failure but a reminder of where true strength comes from. This understanding changes how a person relates to others. They become less demanding of perfection, less quick to assume, less harsh in judgment. They recognize their own struggles in the struggles of those around them. This is one of the quiet gifts of rebuilding. It creates compassion that is not learned from advice, but from experience. There is also a shift in how the heart handles success and loss. When the inner foundation becomes stronger, external changes do not shake it as easily. A good moment is appreciated without being clung to. A difficult moment is endured without being seen as the end of everything. This balance does not remove emotion. It does not turn a person into someone who no longer feels. It simply gives those feelings a place to rest without taking over the entire self. Rebuilding also changes how a person sees time. They become less rushed, less pressured by the need to have everything figured out quickly. They begin to accept that some answers come slowly and that growth is not something that can be forced. This patience is not passive. It is active in a quiet way. It continues to show up, continues to try, continues to hope, even when progress is not immediately visible. There is often a moment later on when a person realizes that they are handling a situation differently than they would have before. A moment that once would have caused anger now brings reflection. A moment that once would have caused panic now brings calm. A moment that once would have caused despair now brings trust. This realization can be surprising. It shows that something real has changed even if it was not noticed along the way. The rebuilding of the heart also affects how a person sees their own worth. Instead of measuring value by what they achieve or how they are seen by others, they begin to see worth as something deeper and steadier. Something that does not rise and fall with success or failure. This kind of self-understanding brings a quiet confidence, not the kind that needs to be displayed, but the kind that allows a person to stand calmly in who they are without needing constant validation. There is also a deeper connection that often forms during this process, a connection that is not based on asking only when something is needed, but on remembering even when things are calm. The heart begins to turn inward not only in moments of crisis, but in moments of gratitude. This connection becomes part of daily life, not just part of emergency moments. Over time, the person begins to see that the trial did more than change a situation. It changed the way they move through the world. It changed how they listen, how they speak, how they choose, how they hope. They may still remember the pain. They may still feel the weight of what was lost or delayed. But alongside that memory is another one. The memory of becoming someone who can carry life with more awareness and more depth. This does not mean that future trials will not be difficult. It means that the heart now has a stronger foundation to stand on when they come. In this way, rebuilding is not a one-time event. It is a continuous process. Each challenge adds another layer of understanding. Each moment of patience adds another layer of strength. Each moment of trust adds another layer of peace. And slowly, without needing to announce itself, the heart becomes a place that can hold both joy and sorrow without breaking. A place that can experience the highs of life without losing humility and the lows of life without losing hope. This is what it means for the heart to be rebuilt, not just repaired but reshaped, not just restored but refined. The life on the outside may change in many ways over the years. Situations will come and go, people will enter and leave, plans will rise and fall, but the heart that has been rebuilt carries something lasting through all of it. It carries an inner steadiness that does not depend on everything being perfect, a quiet strength that does not need to prove itself, a deep awareness that even when the path ahead is unclear, the journey itself is shaping something meaningful within. The delay is shaping the strength you will need next. There is a special kind of weight that comes from waiting. It is not as sharp as sudden loss and not as loud as immediate pain. It is quiet. It sits in the background of daily life. It follows into ordinary moments and turns simple questions into heavy ones. Questions about when something will change, when a door will open, when a chapter will finally move forward. This kind of waiting can make time feel different. Days feel longer, nights feel deeper. The heart begins to measure life not by what is happening, but by what is not happening. The absence becomes more noticeable than the presence. And in that space, the mind often starts to create its own explanations. It wonders if it has been forgotten. It wonders if it has fallen behind. It wonders if something has gone wrong. But delay has a different kind of work to do than immediate answers. When something arrives too quickly, it can be taken lightly. It can be used without understanding its weight. It can be carried without realizing its responsibility. Delay changes this. It makes the heart sit with desire long enough to understand what it is truly asking for. During waiting, the heart is slowly being introduced to patience, not as an idea, but as a lived experience. The kind of patience that shows up every day without certainty, the kind that continues to hope without visible proof. This is not a small strength. It is one of the heaviest to carry and one of the deepest to build. In this space of delay, the heart often begins to grow in ways that are not immediately visible. It becomes more reflective. It learns to listen instead of rush. It learns to pause instead of push. These changes do not feel dramatic. They feel slow and almost unnoticeable, but they form a foundation that will matter later when what is being waited for finally arrives. There are moments in life when something good comes, but the heart is not yet ready to hold it. The responsibility is too heavy. The awareness is too small. The expectations are too narrow. Delay gives time for the inner world to expand, so that when the outer world changes, the heart can move with it instead of being overwhelmed by it. Waiting also reveals what truly drives the heart. When there is no immediate reward, the reasons for continuing become clearer. The person begins to see whether they were moving forward for recognition, for approval, for comfort, or for something deeper. This realization can be uncomfortable, but it is also clarifying. It strips away the extra layers of motivation and leaves something simpler and more honest behind. There is also a kind of humility that grows during long periods of waiting. The realization that not everything can be controlled. That effort does not always lead to immediate results. That life does not always respond on demand. This humility can soften the heart. It can make it more open, less rigid, less attached to a single version of how things are supposed to be. When the heart becomes less rigid, it becomes more adaptable. It learns how to adjust without breaking, how to bend without losing direction. This adaptability is a strength that will matter in every stage of life. Because even after one delay ends, another challenge will eventually appear. The heart that has learned how to wait without losing itself will be better prepared to face what comes next. Waiting also changes how a person sees small moments. When the future feels uncertain, the present becomes more noticeable. A quiet conversation, a peaceful morning, a moment of calm in the middle of a busy day. These small things begin to carry more meaning. The heart learns how to find value in what is here instead of only in what is coming. This does not remove the desire for change. It simply adds balance to it. It allows the person to move forward without losing the ability to live where they are. Over time, the delay becomes a kind of teacher. It teaches the heart how to stay steady in uncertainty, how to hold hope without demanding immediate proof, how to keep going even when progress is not clearly visible. These lessons become part of the person. They do not disappear when the waiting ends. They remain, shaping how future opportunities and challenges are handled. There is often a moment later in life when what was once delayed finally arrives. A new stage begins, a door opens, a change happens, and the person realizes something surprising. They realize that the most important part of the waiting was not the outcome, it was who they became during the process. They notice that they now approach things with more care, more thought, more awareness of consequences, more gratitude for what is received. The delay has made them carry success more gently and hardship more steadily. This does not mean they are free from fear or doubt. It means they have learned how to move forward even when those feelings are present. The strength shaped during waiting is not loud. It does not announce itself. It shows up in quiet decisions, in choosing to remain kind when frustrated, in choosing to remain honest when tempted to take shortcuts, in choosing to remain hopeful when discouraged. These choices may seem small in the moment, but they form the structure of a life. There is also a deeper trust that can grow during long delays. Not a trust that everything will happen exactly as imagined, but a trust that whatever happens will be part of a larger story that is still unfolding. This trust allows the heart to release some of the tension it carries. The constant need to predict, to secure, to control. It makes space for a more open way of moving through the world. When the heart no longer feels the need to hold everything tightly, it can hold things more gently. This gentleness extends to how a person treats others, how they treat themselves, and how they respond to change. In this way, delay does not just prepare someone for the next moment, it prepares them for a different way of living. A way that is less rushed, less reactive, more grounded. The waiting becomes part of the strength, not just something to be endured until the strength arrives. And when the next stage finally begins, the person often carries a quiet awareness that this moment was not simply given, it was grown into. The delay shaped the patience needed to handle responsibility. The uncertainty shaped the courage needed to take steps forward. The silence shaped the listening needed to make wise choices. What once felt like being held back begins to look from a distance like being held steady. This trial is quietly preparing you for a higher place. There are moments in life when the heart begins to feel out of place in the very space it is standing in. The surroundings have not changed, but something inside feels restless. The conversations no longer satisfy in the same way. The goals that once felt exciting now feel small. The routines that once brought comfort now feel heavy. This feeling can be confusing because nothing on the outside clearly explains why the inside feels ready to move. This kind of restlessness often appears during trials, when life becomes difficult, when expectations are disrupted, when plans are interrupted. The heart begins to sense that it is being asked to grow beyond where it currently stands. At first, this can feel like being pushed away from something familiar, like being removed from a place that once felt safe. The mind may interpret this as loss or rejection, but there is another way to see it. Sometimes, what feels like being pushed away is actually being lifted upward. Preparation for a higher place rarely feels like elevation. It often feels like pressure. Just as something is strengthened by being tested, the heart is strengthened by being challenged. The trial creates a kind of weight that the heart must learn to carry. And in learning to carry it, the heart becomes capable of holding more than it could before. This does not happen all at once. It happens slowly, through moments that seem ordinary on the surface, choosing to remain honest when it would be easier to hide, choosing to remain patient when it would be easier to react, choosing to remain hopeful when it would be easier to give up. These choices may feel small, but they shape the inner world in powerful ways. They expand the heart's capacity. They deepen awareness. They build a kind of strength that cannot be seen, but can be felt in how a person moves through life. There is also a shift that happens in how a person views responsibility. Before the trial, responsibility may have been something to avoid, something that felt heavy or restrictive. But during the trial, the heart begins to see responsibility differently. It begins to see it as trust. Trust that is given, not earned. Trust that comes with care, not just expectation. This change in perspective prepares the heart for roles and spaces that require depth rather than display. Places where influence is not about being noticed but about being steady, where impact is not about being loud but about being consistent. A higher place is not always a public place. Sometimes it is a place within, a place of greater clarity, greater sincerity, and greater awareness of how actions affect others. The trial often brings a person face to face with their own limits. It shows where strength ends and where help is needed. This awareness can feel uncomfortable because it challenges the idea of being fully self-sufficient, but it also opens the door to a deeper form of reliance. This reliance changes how success and failure are experienced. Success becomes something to be carried with humility rather than pride. Failure becomes something to be carried with reflection rather than shame. This balance is part of being prepared for a higher place, a place where neither success nor failure is allowed to define the entire self. There is also a refinement of intention that happens during trials. When things are easy, intentions can mix with many other desires, recognition, approval, comfort, status. But when things are difficult, these extra layers begin to fall away. The heart becomes more focused on what truly matters, on what feels honest, on what feels meaningful. This focus creates a clarity that guides future choices. This clarity is not loud or dramatic. It shows up in simple decisions, in what is chosen to pursue, in what is chosen to let go, in how time and energy are spent. These decisions shape the direction of life in subtle but lasting ways. The trial also changes how a person listens. They become more attentive, more present, less rushed to speak, and more willing to understand. This kind of listening builds deeper connections with others because it comes from a place of shared humanity rather than surface interaction. This ability to connect on a deeper level is another form of preparation. It equips the heart to walk alongside others, not above them, to guide without controlling, to support without needing to be seen as the source of strength. There is often a moment later on when a person finds themselves in a situation that requires a level of patience, wisdom, or steadiness they did not have before, and they realize that the trial they once struggled through gave them exactly what they needed for this moment. They see how the waiting taught them to pause before deciding, how the loss taught them to value what remains, how the uncertainty taught them to move forward without needing every answer. This realization can be quiet, but it is powerful. It turns memory into meaning. The heart begins to see its past struggles not as wasted time, but as training. Training for moments that require more than surface level strength. A higher place in this sense is not just about position or outcome, it is about perspective, about seeing the world with more depth, about understanding people with more compassion, about moving through life with more awareness of what truly lasts. This perspective brings a kind of calm that is not easily shaken, a calm that remains even when situations change, because it is rooted in understanding rather than circumstance. The trial also teaches the heart how to hold both confidence and humility at the same time. Confidence in the ability to move forward, humility in the recognition that not everything is controlled. This balance allows a person to step into new spaces without needing to prove themselves and without needing to hide themselves. There is a quiet dignity that grows from this place, a way of standing in life that feels steady, not defensive, open, not exposed, strong, not hardened. This dignity is part of what the trial prepares. Over time, the person may notice that they are no longer drawn to the same kinds of validation they once sought, the same kinds of approval, the same kinds of reassurance. They carry a deeper sense of self that does not need constant reinforcement from the outside. This inner steadiness allows them to walk into new chapters without losing their center. When the heart finally steps into what feels like a higher place, it may look back at the trial with a different kind of understanding. Not gratitude for the pain itself, but recognition of what the pain shaped. They see how it taught them to hold both success and struggle with the same steady hands, how it taught them to remain present instead of reactive, how it taught them to choose depth over display. In this way, the trial becomes part of the foundation of the new place, not something left behind. The heart carries forward the lessons, the patience, the clarity, and the quiet strength that were formed in the difficult season. And as life continues to unfold, the person walks with a deeper awareness that every challenge holds the possibility of preparation, that every difficult moment carries within it the seeds of growth for a place not yet reached. This awareness does not remove fear or uncertainty, but it gives them context. It places them within a larger story. A story where each trial is not just an obstacle but a step, not just a burden but a shaping, not just a moment to endure but a moment that quietly builds the heart for what lies ahead. And in this understanding, the person continues forward, not rushing, not resisting, but walking with a sense that even when the path feels steep, it is leading somewhere meaningful, somewhere that requires the very strength, awareness, and depth that this trial is now quietly and patiently creating within. And when this moment passes and life continues to move the way it always does, carry this understanding gently. Not everything that hurt was meant to harm. Not everything that left was meant to be lost. Not everything that delayed was meant to deny. Some things came to soften the heart. Some things left to make room for what could finally grow. Some things waited so the soul could become strong enough to hold what is coming. There is no need to rush the path. There is no need to compare the journey. There is no need to explain the story to those who are not walking it. What is being shaped inside matters more than what is being seen outside. So walk forward quietly, with patience that does not need to be proven, with trust that does not need to be announced, with a heart that knows it is not forgotten, even in the moments it feels unseen. And when the night feels long again and the questions return, remember this. You are not being pushed away. You are being drawn closer. You are not being delayed. You are being prepared. Carry that with you, not as a thought, but as a way of moving through every next step. And let the heart rest in the understanding that the one who sees every struggle also sees every moment of patience, every quiet effort, and every step taken in faith, even the ones no one else ever notices. And when this moment passes and life continues to move the way it always does, carry this understanding gently. Not everything that hurt was meant to harm. Not everything that left was meant to be lost. Not everything that delayed was meant to deny. Some things came to soften the heart. Some things left to make room for what could finally grow. Some things waited so the soul could become strong enough to hold what is coming. There is no need to rush the path. There is no need to compare the journey. There is no need to explain the story to those who are not walking it. What is being shaped inside matters more than what is being seen outside. So walk forward quietly, with patience that does not need to be proven, with trust that does not need to be announced, with a heart that knows it is not forgotten even in the moments it feels unseen. And when the night feels long again and the questions return, remember this. You are not being pushed away. You are being drawn closer. You are not being delayed. You are being prepared. Carry that with you, not as a thought, but as a way of moving through every next step. And let the heart rest in the understanding that the one who sees every struggle also sees every moment of patience, every quiet effort, and every step taken in faith, even the ones no one else ever notices.